So this lecture is about poster design, but to introduce poster design, I wanted to talk more about color. Color can add variety and mood to a design, and just like a typeface speaks to us, so does color. There's often symbolic associations, and color can have an immense impact on the mood of your designs and the way people respond to the design. Colors have cultural meanings. For example, in Western culture, white can symbolize luminosity, absolute purity, innocence, heaven. It can also symbolize sterility. Ancient cults often draped themselves in white to glorify the divine. Yellow is a very organic color, and for most cultures, the sun is linked to yellow. It can signify brilliance, warmth, abundance. Its luminosity can suggest the color of flowers in spring and harvest. And when faded, it can symbolize a dryness, like a desert dryness. And yellow is a little bit hard on our eye. So if something is too yellow, it can be hard for us to see it. Red has significance in ancient myths. The earth is described as red clay. It signifies blood. In most cultures, red will symbolize strength, fertility, hunt, crime, virility, danger, and love. But it's interesting because, for example, in the West, a bride would never get married in red. But in the East, often in India, for example, a bride can wear red at her wedding. So always remember that colors have cultural significance, and depending on who your audience is, they can mean different things. Going to purple, purple is a very prestigious color. It was reserved for the clothing of nobles. It can signify luxury, wealth, and sophistication. And then we have blue, the color of the sky and the sea. It can be peaceful and tranquil. Blue can actually cause the body to produce calming chemicals, and blue can also be cold and depressing. Green symbolizes nature. It's calming, refreshing. People wait to appear on TV. People who are waiting to appear on TV sit in a green room to relax. Brides in the Middle Ages wore green to symbolize fertility. Dark green can be masculine, conservative, and can imply wealth. Then we have brown, which is solid, reliable. Brown is the color of the earth and is abundant in nature. Light brown can imply genuineness, while dark brown is similar to wood or leather. And brown can also be kind of sad and wistful. Then we have black, which can symbolize authority, power, submission. Priests wear black to signify submission to God. And black can kind of symbolize a lurking danger, and it can really be deep in our consciousness, and we can see it as fear, night, death, soul, and spirits. So here's a color wheel, and there's different ways of looking at a color wheel, but a really helpful thing for you to do as a designer is to take a color wheel and then really look at how these colors relate to each other geographically on this wheel. For example, colors that are close to each other tend to be more harmonious. We call that kind of color scheme analogous. And for example, if you put a purple and a blue together, that's an analogous color scheme, and it can really be easy on the eye, and it can also be very sophisticated. When you take colors that are opposite each other, so for example, let's take this kind of orange yellow and this blue, there is a contrast that occurs. So colors opposite on the color wheel create intensity or contrast, and that can also really enhance a design or an image because it makes the image pop more. It makes our eye able to see more detail. So this color scheme is obviously two really different colors, so there's some contrast going on, and it's very intense, and there's kind of this bold impression, and it really suits this particular image. Here's a good example of color and balance. So for example, you see this kind of soft color contrast with these like stark black robes, and it it really kind of creates this almost analogous color scheme where you have these kind of dark, rich colors all together. And then you have this bright yellow, which is a contrasting color on this other side. And what the designer did is they put the text in here and then they made this one word, photographer black. So it really kind of creates this balance within the space with this dark black on the left and then the black of the word on the right. So it kind of pulls the two sides together, even though the color is radically different. This is a beautiful design. The image in the background is monochromatic. There's just one color, and it's been kind of saturated into the image. And then you can see that the designer has added red text and white text, and then they've actually drawn some little circular graphics and lines here. And so it really creates this contrast to the photo, these little dots and this red text, so we really see them within the space. And the text alignment works well with the feeling of the music itself. The red Latin kind of balances with the red dots to the left, so there's this visual harmony going on. Some colors advance and others recede. While this happens mostly with warm colors advancing and cool colors receding, it can also really depend on placement and what colors are next to each other. But generally, warm colors come toward the viewer, warm colors being red and orange, cool colors move away from the viewer, cool colors being blue and green. Complementary colors, which are colors that are actually opposite each other on the color wheel, are full of this vibrant tension. So that's a really good way to create energy in your design. So looking here, which colors advance, which colors recede. Sometimes the same color can advance or recede depending upon what color it is placed with. So always, when you're designing, really lay out the colors next to each other and look at what they do to each other, because you might like a color, but it might not be appropriate to place it with a color that's already in the image. So you really have to do these kind of color layouts where you think about it, you test it, you do side-by-side comparisons. That's always the way to work in design. Multiple variations, looking and contrasting and seeing what works and what is the best solution. This is Hans Hofmann. He's a fine artist, a painter. He was also called a colorist. And his paintings are really brilliant because when you see them in a gallery, what's happening here is, depending on how he created the shape or what color he put next to the shape, he's creating this interesting visual depth. So you look here at this really orange rectangle in the foreground, and that's kind of pulling our eye, and it looks like that orange is just sitting out in space in front of the rest of the painting. But if you look over here, it's kind of the same color, but because of its relationship to the black and the texture, it really looks like it's receding into that background. So if you get a chance, check out more of his work. You can do a Google search and look at his paintings, or if you ever get an opportunity, really look at the work in a gallery or in a museum, because it's pretty amazing when you see it at full scale. This design is really nice because what the designer did is they have this beautiful image, and it looks like they've kind of desaturated some of the image and then kind of intensified some of the image. So if you look up at this orange here, it's been kind of intensified. So all of the orange and yellow in this image has been kind of brought out, whereas all the other colors perhaps have kind of been pulled in and desaturated a little bit. So you really get this kind of almost monochromatic analogous color scheme going on with this image. But then what the designer did is they put this text here, and they took a color that was already inside the image. So you look at the word inside, it's the same orange that you already have here, which creates this really nice balance and makes it look very appropriate in the space. And then I really like the layout with the text, how they're using uppercase and lowercase. And it really makes the word inside kind of recede into the background. It gives a perfect reflection of the meaning of the copy. Legibility. One important thing when working with color is you have to think about the legibility and the contrast. The greatest contrast you can get is probably black on white, and the least is probably yellow on white. So you can see here this really pops out, whereas this is really hard to read. As the background color kind of moves closer to the text, the legibility will decrease. But you can get a very kind of sophisticated design by putting two colors that are close to each other together, or even the same color with a different saturation or more intensity together can create this interesting visual effect. So here's an example of using percentages of black and gray and kind of placing the word on top. And it kind of can create a really nice background texture effect. So I recommend experimenting with this. And often beginning designers just want to throw a bunch of color in because color is so exciting and fun to work with. But it's good advice to pull back sometimes, to first work in gray and think about different shades of gray, then to add in one color, and then look at the gray, look at the one color design, and then perhaps to add in two colors, maybe a complementary color scheme, and then to compare all three palettes and see what's working, what's not, and then maybe to mix it up with the complementary color scheme, create a whole different color palette. And you can do a lot with simple variations of percentages of one color. So in this example, the color is really helping define and separate the items of copy. And it also kind of gives this added visual meaning. So if you look down here, this is a very busy, kind of intense, saturated photograph. And then they've put these rectangles of flat color over this photograph to give the text space and to also kind of distinguish and separate out specific text blocks. Here you see that this is basically a grayscale image with a little splash of color thrown in, and it really works. So this red fish kind of connects with this red text. So there's just two splashes of red here, one on the bottom, one on the top, but it helps to balance this design, and it really makes our eye move to that text and through that text. This is a seminal album for Blue Note Sound, and this is Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers with the Horace Silver Quintet. And this is a very Swiss design. When we look at this, we see that it's really about the layout of this text. And Swiss design also often used these kind of monochromatic visuals. This is a very captivating image, but it's one color, and then this white text is kind of laid out here in a very precise, ordered way.